What happened? Kick. Hello.
Hey, pencil.
Hello. Well, hello, Steve Conley from the depths of Atlantis.
Got a little Gulf Coast kicked up on you?
I haven't been swept out to sea yet. I'm excited to be here.
Everybody, welcome back to your favorite pandemic podcast, Pencil to Pencil. Not pencil to like Prince Pencil or I pencil. It's T.O. pencil.
I pencil.
That's right. Oh, what up, Raphael? Good to see you, brother. That our old buddies dropping in. Let me give you the rules of the road. This fine show is brought to you by 3 expert cartoonists who talk about the business of being a professional, what you may call shop talk in some circles. But the cool part is that you get to be a part of the show and ask questions and find out a little bit more about something. Who's your friend, Mike?
It's my cousin.
Bruce, right? Is that his name?
Rosie Greer.
Rosie Greer. You get to learn a little bit more about the creative arts, be it cartooning, animation,
gardening.
Gardening. You're gonna keep throwing tennis balls at me tonight, aren't you? And all things of that stripe and above. My name is JAMAR NICHOLAS, Philadelphia's favorite son, and some people call me Captain Scholastic. I'm trying to earn that title.
Oh,
I
saw there was some news today.
Yeah, what news was that, Mike?
The news today was that your book is already secretly out.
I saw somebody broke the street date.
The only secret locations, so only cool people could see it.
That's right, in Delaware, yeah. At a Barnes and Noble.
First state.
That's right, first to break the street date. We're talking about my new graphic novel by Scholastic Graphics. Leon Extraordinary will be on sale.
Up. You got a copy right there. Come on. Product placement. Come on. Fill the screen. There you go.
There you go. 10-4, good buddy. Go cop it. I am also joined by my ever-loving co-host. You know him. You love him. The modern marvel of comic illustration, Michael Manley. What's up, Mike Manley?
Hello, everybody.
I like your lighting tonight, Mike.
Yeah, I just I'm always playing around with I probably need to get one of those like official studio podcast lighting.
Oh, like the Ring and everything.
Yeah.
And also check again for Bikini Bottom. your favorite cartoonist of mine, Stone Cold Steve Conley. What's going on, Steve Conley?
Hey, everybody. I'm doing great. Ian is going to be right over me any minute now. So if you lose me tonight, I apologize. But I'm glad I'm here right now. And right. Yeah, super excited to be here. Excited to talk to our guest.
Yeah.
And don't forget, Steve is a Ringo
Award nominee.
And today is the last day. If you are a web cartoonist, professional comic creator, go over to Ringo Awards, and now's a chance to vote. It ends tonight. Oh, and there was
RingoAwards.com.
RingoAwards.com. And there was other Ringo Awards news this week.
Well, what would that be, Steve Conley?
I believe Jamar the Extraordinary will be will be giving the keynote at the Ringo Awards this year.
Yes, that is true. Thank you.
So do you have to write that?
Well, I have to do it. Yes.
Do you write it, or are you going to just get up there and wing it?
I'm not going to riff. I'll write it out, and I'll. It's funny because I do so much of this. I think I would hate to just go up there and like shoot from the hip. So
a cup of coffee.
Yeah, all right. Hey guys, I have some notes already, but yeah, I'm planning on writing it and just kind of being as natural as I can be. So
let me ask you this, Jamar. Since you'll be in Baltimore, are you going to have a Leon giant mascot?
Like a giant head.
Yeah, you can have somebody walking around just like Leon.
Well, I hope there might be some cosplay, but I myself am not going to be dressed up like Leon or bringing a mascot with me. But you never know, because the book will be out there by then, and we're planning on doing some really great stuff. So if you're in or around the DMV at that time of the year, at the end of October, please stop by. You're going to have a lot of fun. Thanks so much. So, Mike Manley, Steve Conley, we have a really cool guest tonight. George Gant is with us tonight. George is, and we throw this around a lot on the podcast. Some people may think he's an overnight success, and we all know how that works. Overnight successes usually take 10 to 20 years.
Well, the success part's really fast.
Right.
It's that uphill climb to get there.
It's the overnight part. And, we've been talking just about kind of like how that sausage is made lately. That's on a lot of people's minds. And, for new audiences who've never heard of George and now just being exposed to his work, they might be like, oh, yo, you must have just started last week. How'd you get here? So it's always cool to talk to cartoonists about their journey. And he's also kind of like Tahid Bandia, who we had on a couple weeks ago, is doing some really interesting stuff in the comic strip space. And there's lots going on in comic strips. So people are asking all these questions already. Go ahead and post questions in the chat. If you're new to the chat and you're new to watching this live, feel free to put things in the chat. I'll do my best to get them on the screen. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's bring them in. Let me get ready. You ready? You ready? I see you down there, George. All right. Let's bring in our best bud, George Gant. What? Look,
hi.
Yo, what's up, bro?
Oh, nothing much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, you know what? It's you've been on my list for a while. And I'm just glad that we're able to to have you on. I know everybody's super busy, and then especially now, if you're talking about the space, and you can maybe talk to this, George, that you seem like a grind guy, like a hustle guy. Like every 5 seconds you have a new strip online somewhere, or it's an illustration, or it's a something, or there's there's the toddler. Like it seems like you don't really stop. Do you have time to kind of just like, I don't know, chill, or have you said to start separating people from your busy lifestyle? Like I don't have time for that type of stuff.
Well, you know what? I've never been the type of person to really just go out and do things.
Okay.
Like, my example of chill is I'll sit in front of my computer. I'll sketch. Like 9 out of 10 times I'm playing a video game.
Okay.
So like, in that aspect, I try to find time to just relax, of course, because you got to have balance, and I don't want to lose my mind. I don't need any more gray hairs. But yeah, it's a balance. You have to be able to, reset. You have to be able to just relax and chill out. But at the same time, you've got to be able to work. You've got to be able to grind, because if you don't grind, in my opinion, if I don't grind, I feel forgotten. So you just have to figure out a way to make both of those things work. And obviously, still make time for family and things like that. But it's a delicate balance.
Is your grind organized? Because I mean, you can also just be busy but not effective.
Right. Oh no, not at all. I'm the most disorganized person on earth. I will tell you that, like, to begin with, I come from a retail background. I thrive in chaos. It's how I work. Could I stand to be more organized? Of course. Would I be more efficient doing so? Of course. But that would mean I'd have to start, and that's the problem.
Where to start? Where to? Because I asked that because some people split their days up where they don't come right in and they don't start working. They come in and maybe they do business email, they do correspondence, they
take a nap.
You have to, and then you sort of like through the day work up to getting your mojo going, and you start drawing. So maybe you're not drawing at 9 in the morning, or are you a morning person? Because some cartoonists I know would wake up, they'd be over there early in the morning, they'd work, and then like 5 o'clock, family time. You know what I mean? Especially like the older guys that I knew when I came in, since they had family, they would be up. And of course, there was no internet or anything like that.
Right.
They'd be up and they would work. But now, as a cartoonist, you kind of like, you got to do your social media, you got email, you got things coming in during the day. So I'm just sort of interested if you had a
like a routine
pattern or a routine. Yeah.
Well, with me, a lot of like what little routine I have because of, family. Because I have small children and we've got to, take them to school and things like that. So like usually like I'll get up 6:30, anywhere between 6:30 and 7, take the kids to school. Once they're gone, um I'll sit down, I'll just try to work. It doesn't always work that way, but I try to do as much as I can in between those times, like between like 7 and 2, um because that's when it's, in a sense, it's the quietest and I have the most energy at the same time. Um and so I'll, do that stuff at the time. Uh Pick them up from school, do all of that stuff. When they go to bed, I'll either try to get back to whatever I was doing, or I'll sit and chill. That's just Monday through Friday. Saturdays I do like to work the entire day.
Okay.
Um I've got nowhere to go. I've got nothing to do. I'm not really a partier or anything like that.
Sure.
Um my family, I've got plenty in the city, but they're not nearby. So it would take effort to get to them anyway. So, Saturdays, I'm working. Sundays I'm working. And then Monday through Friday is like 7 to 2, and whenever I can after they go to bed.
That's interesting because there's we're all cartoonists here, and also other people we talk to. Everybody's schedule is different because it has to kind of format your life, right? I do know a lot of people who kind of do a stop start, like they do a slow beginning, and then like families in the middle of the day, and then once everybody goes to sleep, you go back in there for a couple more hours, type of
Yeah.
thing. So with that, do you kind of have a? And we have to get too deep into it. But when does your family get to see you? Because you said that Saturday's a lock, right? Don't bother me on Saturday.
Well, it's like even when I'm cartooning, like they're like my immediate family anyway. Um, I'm just working. They come through. We talk. We chat. Sometimes I'll take a break. We'll like play a video game together, like me and my son, um, or whatnot, and I just get back to it.
Okay.
Like,
But
I
is it like they know, oh, dad's in there and his head's down, I shouldn't go in now? Or is it like totally open studio, come in anytime? Dad, I got to do can you help me with this homework problem?
Yeah, it's pretty much open studio. I mean, not by choice, but by where my studio is. Um,
Right.
because like in our house, like my studio's all the way in the back. Like the kitchen is next to me.
Mhm.
So yeah, if they want to find me, they will find me, like whether I want them to or not.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
It's very interesting because when I worked with Williamson, he was an early riser. He would get up early, and he would always be at the studio before Brett or I was at the studio. I think sometimes he would drop his kids, or his wife would drop his kids off at school. I just noticed with the people that have families, the family does, the kids sort of are like they're the clock, they're the big
Right.
gear, and all the other gears spin to that gear. And I just find it interesting to ask cartoonists that, because some people get up, sit down, work, boom, and they're like a machine. That's how I am. I just come in and go. Although now I'm assuming you do the same. You have email. You have like a layer of email before you do anything, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's not with me. Like with my emails, they're not that bad yet. So
I like that. Yeah.
No angry fans writing you.
no, surprisingly, like I haven't gotten any. Like I've gotten angry comments.
Mhm.
Oh boy, I've got comments that I saw like admin delete in real time. But but like no one's. I'm lucky in the sense that no one has come to me directly
Mhm.
with anything yet.
Wow. I mean, that's not surprising, but it's also incredible because you do kind of like a family strip where it's kind of like you would expect. I don't want to say this, Mike, like you expect like vitriol, but for say kind of like Mike, who, and I also know about like never read the comments over at Comics
Oh, oh no, I learned that early.
Yeah.
I learned that day one.
But for some reason, I'm being naive and thinking, well, you know what, George, they got to cut you a break because you have this, you have the, it's the dad and the baby getting into hijinks. Like, what's there to hate? You know what I'm saying? So maybe you can speak to that a little bit. Like, what kind of negative response would you get from a strip like that?
Okay, well, from what I've seen, like the most negative thing I think I've gotten like was the one where the baby was pretending to work. And in my mind I try to view the comic as this character is two. So everyone would say, yeah, she's bad. And I'm thinking, no, she's two.
Mm,
So sometimes the toddler will do things where people will get upset thinking this is a bad child, not realizing that no, she's two. She's just kind of mimicking everything that everyone else does.
mhm,
So I've got this comic where she's pretending to work, and and in the process she's pretending to be like a bad manager, like
mhm.
like one of those like mean rude managers. And people are like, oh, she's so mean, she's just the worst, she's awful. And I'm sitting there thinking, no, she probably saw that somewhere and she's emulating it because she's two, you know.
You would have
She's
changed the name of this strip to She's just two.
Ew.
yeah, like she's not bad, she's a toddler.
Yeah.
Like the comic is called Beware of Toddler. If you know how toddlers act, you'd understand.
It was
Wow.
got too subtle for people. It got
Yeah.
too many layers.
Yeah.
Too real.
Now, as part of your warm up process, do you sketch for a while? Because that's something I'm always interested about. Is like how people do, how artists do what I call enter into the stream. Because like when you're in the stream, it's like almost like a Zen thing. You're not conscious of the outside world. You're in your head, and you're pulling from your head, and that's a very different space as a cartoonist as opposed to a painter who's reacting maybe to, oh, you're outside, or you've got a model, or you've got a still, you're reacting to the outside world, interpreting it. A cartoonist pulls from here. So I'm always interested in, like, do you warm up? Like, some guys warm up, some people don't. So are you a warm up, or are you a not warm up, or
I am in a sense. One thing I do in between like the comics is I draw a lot of fan art. That's my warm up. Usually,
okay.
I'll sketch something out, but I'll take it too far and I'll see it to completion. Like it's a horrible habit, and that I think I might break. And it's just like usually with my comics, with my ideas, like just like from the comics themselves, I kind of just figure that stuff out as I go along. So I don't really plan anything. Like, and so even with the art itself, it's not like I'm like coming from this place where like I'm ready to go. I'm just kind of going as I go along, and then I'll do like a fan art piece like to the side to to kind of loosen my mind, keep myself sane. But I've never been the type of person to just sit down and sketch. Like that's it's difficult to me. Like I've got to see this through.
So with your finished, totally completed warm up sketches, other people's characters and pinups and stuff. What do you do with that stuff? Besides, I know you post a lot of things on social, but do you kind of have a passive revenue stream? Like, do you sell any of your work?
Oh, I used to. Um, Not so much anymore. Just because pandemic, I don't do as many shows as I used to.
Hmm.
Um, I like to just focus on my own stuff. I just do it for fun these days.
Hmm.
Um, I used to. As far as passive revenue, Beware of Toddler is not the only comic I draw.
Mm.
I also draw another comic. It's called Angel Face Investigates. Um, it appears in the Beano every week.
Oh, in London,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, that's hot.
So, so I don't know if I'm the only American over there, but like drawn over there. But yeah, I've got a Beano comic.
Well, you got to talk about that, but maybe we should talk about that now before we go any further. So tell us about how that happened, because that's pretty extraordinary for American cartoonists, or maybe I'm wrong, to be in the the UK comic magazines.
Yeah, well, you know what? They reached out to me.
Mm,
Um, I think they like went back and they looked at their content
mhm.
and they wanted more diverse characters made by more diverse creators. Um, Toddler just happens to be out there. Somebody caught wind of it. And they reached out to me. Obviously, I'm going to say yes. Um, so I've just been drawing that like every week for it will be 2 years in January, I believe.
Oh wow! Does
So they reached out to you to create something, and then that is what you submit. That's the idea that you came up and you submitted to them.
Oh no, no, I'm just the artist. I'm not
Okay.
uh,
writing anything over there. Um, like they've already got the character and they've already got things like that. Like my character, her name's Angel Face. She's like a detective. Uh, I mean, there are kids, but she's a detective, and it's silliness. But the strip already existed before I came along, and I guess they put it on the back burner,
mhm.
and they decided to reboot it. And when they did, they reached out to me to draw the comics.
Oh wow!
That's great.
So who writes it?
Uh, who writes it? I do not want to butcher his name,
Mm.
but it's like their main writer. It's like the guy that, like because they have their they have their Dennis the Menace.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. There's a British Dennis the Menace who doesn't look like Dennis the Menace.
And
yeah.
I think that's drawn by an American as well. I think Shannon Gallant does that, former
Oh, is
GI
that
Joe artist.
oh, is that true?
Oh,
Well,
well,
oh, go ahead.
the writer. Well, the funny thing about that Dennis the Menace, uh, is that Dennis the Menace debuted at the same time as ours, and it's a complete coincidence.
Isn't that wild? Yeah,
It,
that's true.
yeah, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
So it's not like Miracle Man or whatever, who was like some version of Captain Marvel or whatever it was back.
No, they really debuted at the same time, and they're with the same name. It's really funny. I
it-
don't. I don't think I've read a lot of Dennis, like London Dennis, but he's like a. I guess like a. I don't know. He's the British version of Dennis the Menace. Right?
yeah. Like character wise, they are actually pretty similar. Yeah, I don't know why like we
Who
can't get
cares with
any
the
of that over
brunette?
here.
I think that's pretty much the only one. It's like a mirror universe. Dennis.
Yeah, yeah. He's got like
Does he
black.
have a goatee?
So hold on. So George, with that Beano stuff, do they send you like tear sheets? Because it's a hard copy. It's print too, or is it all digital?
It's print. It is print. Of course, they do digital as well.
Yeah.
I've yet to see a single copy of the magazine in print.
Wow.
So if
Um,
they wanted to see that, do they go to like Beano.com?
yeah, Beano.com, like you go to their website. It's a very kid focused website.
Yeah.
So it's more like fun stuff for kids and things like that. But I believe you can like subscribe from there. Um, I don't know if they ship to the States.
Hmm.
But that's one of the things that I would like to know because I like to have a copy of one of the things I made
Right.
just on hand.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's been fun. It's been a great experience. It keeps me filled with coffee at least.
So, and
So,
now you're in a very special club of like people like Mike and some of our other compatriots who are juggling a couple of strips at the same time. So how do you make all that work? Do you have a certain day? Like when we talked to Tahid, he had a very segmented week. On Mondays he's writing, and then Tuesdays and Wednesdays he's drawing, and then So how do you kind of fit in your UK strip on top of Toddler?
well, the UK strip I usually just do on Sundays.
Okay.
Um, 5 6 panels. I'll just spend the entire day just working on that. They're like Monday is usually when I try to write toddler. Then the rest of the week is just drawing.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I've got a lot of work. Like it's not like a perfect routine. It's not a perfect schedule, and there is a lot of work to be
Mm.
had. And I'm new to this. Like I'm still new to like juggling both strips. I'm
Yeah.
still new to toddler being the way it is now.
Hmm.
So I'm like still figuring these things out. Um, but I'm working on it.
That's really cool. And we'll come back to this, but now it's time to get in our time machine. And we want to kind of ask you about your origin story. Like when you were a young George, did you always want to be a cartoonist? Did you have other things that you were looking to do? Like how did you get to this point where you were doing this at such
Oh,
a high level? Tell us
oh
about
no,
that.
yeah, no, this is a lifelong thing. I I can actually remember like the exact moment. Like I was like 9, and my family we moved to the house I would eventually grow up in.
Mm-hmm.
And we had family that was living there also at the time. And one of my cousins had just, like comic book collections,
Mm.
just like stacks and stacks and stacks. You had your Peanuts, you had your Garfield, Calvin Hobbes, Bloom County. Um, and like those things, like I'm a homebody. I like to stay in the house. Back then I was just playing Nintendo. Um, I never really wanted to go out and do things like that, even as a kid, which and now thinking back on it, I think was a very good thing. But I would just like read like Bloom County and Calvin and Hobbes. Those were like my two favorites of
Mm-hmm.
that stack. And um, it got to the point where I just started drawing in school. Like I wouldn't draw like that kind of stuff, but I'll like draw my own little things, like my own little characters, and
Mm-hmm.
like Ninja Turtles because it was the late '80s, early '90s. Um, and I just draw turtles all day, and I would do this as opposed to like schoolwork. Like
Mm-hmm.
like I just
True
want
cartoonist.
you know I don't want to do fractions. I want to draw. Kids stay in school, but so I did that stuff throughout grade school. Eventually in high school, that's when I discovered editorial cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have a specific favorite cartoonist, and honestly, I can't even name any from that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought I'd try my hand at it. So I reached out to the person who was like running the school paper, and I asked if I could like draw some editorials to see what happened. Um, I drew a ton of those. She said yes. I ended up drawing for school paper. Somewhere in that, I ended up winning 4 awards
Mm.
Wow.
for editorial cartooning from the citywide thing.
Wow.
Um, and I'm in Chicago, so it's like the like all of Chicago.
Wow.
So that was pretty neat.
So wait,
Um,
hold on, George. I gotta dig into this. So what kind of editorial are you doing in high school? Is it kind of like Miss Gribley in eighth period is selling contraband food out of her desk? Like what kind of editorial cartoons were you doing back then?
I can't really remember any of them.
Uh-huh.
Why is our pizza
Um,
square?
Yeah, that's right.
But they were surprisingly like more on the serious side. They weren't funny jokey things.
Right. Okay.
Um, like the only one I remember is it was a Native American and he was crying. It was it was basically like like the old like 70s ad with the Native American with the
And
carrot coming down the
with
street.
his trash, yeah,
Jay Silverheels. Yeah.
yeah.
So I basically drew that before I realized what it was, before I even seen the commercial.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
And that's the only one I remember. I don't remember why. I don't remember what it was about. I do know like that was our mascot at the time. So I'm guessing it was like something school related.
Oh,
Oh wow.
Um, and that's like the only one I can remember.
the
That's
school mascot crying because they lost a championship or something.
I don't know. That's I really can't remember. Like
Did you draw it on the duo shade paper that
Oh,
a lot of the
wow.
local cartoonists did back then? You know, the stuff you would activate with the chemical.
nah, man, I was just regular like photo paper, just regular printer paper. I didn't
Okay.
yeah, it was like I didn't know what I was doing. Like I just figured out what I was doing like 3 months ago. But but yeah, so I did that. And you know how it is, like you leave high school, like you do other things.
Yeah.
I eventually went to school for graphic design, because everyone's telling me, like, why are you drawing cartoons? You gotta learn Photoshop. You gotta learn Photoshop.
Mm. Mhm.
This is like 2001, so that's when everybody was trying to, get on the Photoshop train.
Mhm.
Back when it was $600,
I know
and
that.
and so I did that. I didn't come back to cartooning until like some years later when like Penny Arcade came around, and when I discovered the Boondocks, and I realized, hey, I want to draw cartoons again.
Mm.
And
How long of a period was that? Where you were not? Were you still drawing, but you weren't just?
yeah, I mean, just drawing, just like for fun, like nothing, like no cartoons or nothing like that. It was pretty much like from 18 until like 23, 24.
Mm.
Wow.
Mhm.
Um, I wasn't I didn't think of cartoons at all. Until I discovered webcomics. That was like right when webcomics were starting to really like take off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I thought I'd try my hand at that, and that's actually like when I like created my first webcomic. And
In Photoshop?
no, I was poor. This was like cheap like photo editing software that came with the printer.
Oh, right. That was the CD you got out of the Staples in the spinner rack, right?
Yeah, it was that kind of stuff where you save something at 300 DPI and it looks the exact same as 72 DPI when you print it out. um,
And what was that comic?
Yeah.
and the comic was called The Reset Button,
Reset
Okay.
button. Okay.
and it was kind of a gaming comic, kind of me just ripping off Robot Chicken and Family Guy and the Boondocks and all the adult sitcoms that was out at the time.
Mm.
But I hate that comic, but I love the characters. um, but I did that a couple years.
How
And
often did that come out?
that was, oh my god, that was like, how long have I been doing this? That'd have been like 15, 16 years ago.
But I mean, did you put it out like 3 days a week, 1 day a week?
Yeah. Well,
Oh, no, I was doing 3 days a week.
and were you on a portal? Did you have your own site at that point? Like, how are you
Well,
getting it on the web?
no, I think I had like an old GeoCities page at one point.
GeoCities. You hurting my feelings, man.
I had a GeoCities page. I had like no, Angel Fire. It was Angel Fire.
Even
Wow.
better. Even better. That little icon who's like digging it under construction. Yeah.
Yeah, I hated it because I didn't know how to use frames.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to be like the Penny Arcades and like the VG Cats of the world, but it just didn't happen.
I
Um,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Joe. Let me cut you off.
no, I was gonna say, but I did it for a couple years. That was like right before I started on the grind, and I think that was really the webcomic that really taught me, like that really like had me doing this like long term.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And how long did on the grind? So you were doing 3 days a week with your first comic,
Mhm.
and then when you did your second, which was also a web comic, how often were you doing? And I imagine by then you actually had a copy of Photoshop.
Not in the beginning. I was using GIMP.
Oh, I was waiting
Okay,
for that. Yeah, GIMP. Yeah.
I was using GIMP, and don't sleep on GIMP. GIMP is probably the best free program out there, in my personal opinion. Like that I know of. If
Mm.
there's a better one, I don't know of it. It's new to me if I haven't seen it.
I love it.
you know. But I
What was your schedule?
Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, pretty much.
Oh, so that was another 3-day strip you were doing.
Yeah, it was another 3-day trip,
Mm.
and that one was pretty much just kind of me venting.
Mm.
Um, Me venting about my job because I worked in a coffee shop, and you get all sorts of crazy characters in a coffee shop, and that was also me in my like early to mid 20s thinking I could do anything. Like I tried to get this comic syndicated.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a good comic. But I tried to get it syndicated. Um, but it's the one that probably like taught me the most.
Mm-hmm.
So what was
Um,
the process? What was your process in going? Okay, I'm doing this 3-day a week comic, and then how did your approach go? Okay, like I want to get it obviously in the papers. There was probably more syndicates back then than there are now. So did you send it to like Universal and King Features? You send like a month. Did you talk to them?
Mm-hmm.
What was
yeah.
the process?
Um, I did it 3 times a week, and I basically just waited until I had like 24 comics, and then I just like printed them out on paper and just sent them off everywhere.
Old school. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. This was I didn't even know if you could like email it back then. Like back then, like the submissions guidelines was you send it off by snail mail.
Yeah.
Um, and I did that, and nobody bit, obviously, because it was yeah.
Did you get feedback though? I mean, did they say, "Hey, we like this, but we don't like that," or "This is not working," or
Mm-hmm.
Oh no! I got the canned responses like through and through. Um, but you know what? I kept that. Like, I didn't really. I think I tried like one other time after that. But I kept at the comic strip, and even now after Tyler, that's my longest running webcomic. There's like 400 strips.
Wow.
But that
Um,
was your first one drawing from your own life,
it
like
was.
telling experiences. Yeah.
It was the first one drawn from my own life, and it was the first one I got book collections printed, made, published.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
So, and what year is this now?
This would have been like 2008. Uh, I got the first book published in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was 2013. Let me
Wow.
see if I think I might actually have one over
You got
here.
one. Got one on ice in the back there. Let's see it.
Let me see. Yeah, I got it taped up because I was using it as a mock for the Toddler book. So I got the Toddler cover over it. All
That's
right.
great.
So it's dusty because there was tape on it, but this is the book.
Oh wow.
It is a glorious 40 pages.
Fantastic.
Man, so thick. I love it.
but you also had to learn about printing, right? And learn
Yeah.
about getting a printing quote and how things are. So I imagine your graphic design then comes in to help you with doing that.
Well, I got lucky with this. Well, kind of, sort of. This book actually had a publisher attached.
Mm.
It was published with Hound Comics. I think they were like a startup, and
Mm-hmm.
they pretty much needed content, in my opinion, and they just happened to pick up on the grind. They published this book and one other after this. And yeah, I learned about a lot about publishing through that experience.
One thing that is very evergreen in these conversations is that and this even happened last week. Last week when we were talking to Brett, is that there's a moment when you decide to jump off the cliff in a good way. Like even you just going, I'm going to send this stuff to the syndicates. It's just something that normally people don't do, especially from the sounds like your origin story that you kind of really got baked into, the new webcomic era, like with PvP and Penny Arcade and VG Cats. So, what kind of made you want to steer into doing syndication, where it seemed like the internet was the place to go with all this stuff? What made you go right instead of left?
You know what? I'm not. I don't know the exact moment,
Hmm.
but I think it was upon discovering the Boondocks comic strip.
Okay.
Because like around that time, roughly, like I can't remember if like the show was out back then,
Hmm.
but that's when I discovered the comic itself, and like I read through it, and I read Aaron Magruder's journey, and it was like just motivating, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's motivating, and I'm sitting there thinking, hey, he did this. Hey, why don't I try to do this? And the fact that I've got this comic, and the fact that I'm inspired by this other comic, and the fact that I'm in my 20s where my hubris is at an all-time high, um, tells me, hey, let's do this because you can do this because you're in your 20s and you have a comic strip and it exists, so therefore everyone must love it. Yeah, and we all know how that went.
Yeah. So, but to just stand on that for a couple more minutes, what I find really interesting is that it sounds, and kind of what my struggle was back then, which is a little earlier than your start, was just figuring out that you were the only person that was trying to go in this direction. So I did a lot of.
Only person in your circle, you mean?
Yeah, like you're totally a unicorn. And I guess my question to you now is like, did you have a support system, or did you have anybody else who were like, yeah, George, I'm gonna submit my strip to too. Let's see who gets in first. Like, or was it just you solo the whole way?
No, just me solo.
Yeah, yeah,
I Back then I didn't really know a lot of other creatives.
yeah.
Like you knew like guys from like MySpace, and
I feel old. Uh
the,
huh.
I'm just saying, hey, MySpace still exists, kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
to a point. But like the guys you knew from MySpace and like Facebook, like you meet other creators through there. Um, but as far as like in my analog life, like no, like nobody took it seriously. No one ever takes it seriously until they see fruit.
Mm, mhm.
And that's okay, and that's totally fine. But no, I was just going about it my own way. And in my opinion, the easiest way to learn how to do something is to do it and
Mm,
fail and learn from that. So
mm.
I tried it, I failed, and I learned from it.
Were you getting any, since you'd had a couple strips online, you were not getting in any sort of like art community, but other creatives would like, you know, write you or you would write them, or, hey man, I just read your strip, or hey, here's
Mhm.
my strip. There was no camaraderie or going back and forth or support that way.
Nothing major. Like it was very quiet. I want to say it was very quiet from the time I started.
Mhm.
Even throughout the on the grind stuff with the book publishing and all that kind of stuff, it still felt really quiet.
Mhm.
Um, and I felt like it's been like that, like from like that time since the beginning until maybe about 5, 6 years ago.
Mhm.
And and then that's you start to talk to people more. And it's not because it's not like anyone's fault. Everyone's busy. People are working on their own comics. At the same time, if somebody did try to reach out to me, it's probably because they like something and they want to learn how to do it. And I'll give advice if I can,
Mhm.
but yeah, I didn't really feel that real sense of community until well after I was like doing this stuff.
That's really intriguing.
Yeah, because I think the analog world, the meat world, as I call it, there was what seems strange to me because I would think, well, the online world is actually easier to meet cartoonists from all over the world without actually having to go to a convention.
Right.
Because usually in the olden days, you would meet maybe another artist at your local comic book store. So
Mhm.
I always imagine it's like, everybody's going to go, bomb the target, and everybody wants to, to break in, and you start out and there's like 5 guys, one makes it through.
Right.
Right.
We were talking to Phil Hester about that, and like how many guys he knew who were all trying to break in at the same time he was. And you realize that, there for every cartoonist that's working, there are literally hundreds of people who said, I want to be a cartoonist. I mean, like if you teach a class
Mhm.
cartooning, there's 30 people in the class who all want to be cartoonists. None of them will actually numerically work out to be cartoonists, right? But there's 30 people in there who say, I want to do cartooning. And when I would teach a cartooning class, the amount of older over 40 guys who wanted to be cartoonists usually outweighed the 14-year-old. There were more. I remember one guy was like an air traffic controller.
Wow.
A
Yeah.
lot of people were like lifelong wanted to do cartooning, and you just realize that there's a lot of like weekend warriors, so to speak. You know what I mean? Who like the guys that would go to the equivalent of the people that go to what is it that baseball fantasy camp? They pay their money to go down and like get stitches. Down in Florida during
Yeah.
spring training. So I'm just sort of interested in that because it seemed like there was almost like two bubbles. When you say, Steve, like there was like the beginning bubble of everybody because of the internet. A lot of people got on early and were doing comic strips. And then that kind of like evened out, and like then boom, it seemed like there was another big
Mhm.
bump around 2010, 11, 12, people coming in and wanting to do like almost like a cycle, like another
Mhm. Like a wave, right?
wave of
Yeah.
people coming in. And now there's even a bigger wave, I think, because of things like webtoons and Go Comics and
But it's so interesting that the recurring thing we're hearing from web cartoonists is that, okay, I did this comic, it failed. Okay, so I started my next one. And it's so interesting that there isn't like it failed. Okay, I closed up shop and went into, I don't know, woodworking.
Real estate.
Yeah.
I started selling women's garments.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that was a horrible failure. So I got my pens out and created something new. And it's
And when do you decide that it's a failure? Like at
Right.
what point do you like go like, no, man, I'm done.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering how did you know that Reset, because I think you brought Reset back, right?
I did. I brought Reset back as a kids comic. I wanted to do more like younger skewing. I become a father at the time, so like my own taste has changed. And I brought Reset back, and at the time I saw like what was popular, like the Cartoon Network things and things like that. Like you've got like Steven Universe and Teen Titans Go, those kind of things.
Mhm.
And for the record, I think Teen Titans Go is hilarious. Um, and I wanted to do like something like that with my characters because I love the characters, and I thought they had legs. But I know that like the first version like just didn't work. Like I don't even enjoy them. So But I love the character, so I wanted to bring them back, and I wanted to do something like, if you can't tell, like I'm a huge fan of video games. That's an actual Atari 2600 cartridge right there.
Yeah, bro.
Is that Pac-Man?
It is.
Fantastic.
It is. Only place you get like Atari 2600 and like PlayStation 5 in like the same like area. But I wanted to do something that that celebrated video games, like as a medium within the world of comics, while at the same time kind of being like like Tiny Toon Adventures, like that, but like with video games where you can like show like the legacy of like this medium, but make it fun and make it funny and kind of educate like children at the same time without being educational. So I brought it back. I self-published a book with that. Um, I'm technically not done with it. I kind of had to stop because of Toddler, but I still have plans for those characters and for that comic.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So how did you know that the grind that it was time to put that on the shelf and go back to reset?
Um, I I honestly I really wasn't enjoying drawing them anymore.
Hmm.
Like it got to the point where drawing comics felt more like a chore. Um, I had already done like 400 at that point. At the same time, that comic drew upon my experiences working in a coffee shop, and at that point, I hadn't worked in a coffee shop in years.
Oh.
So, like I was doing other things. So, and the thing about like on the grind is that like it was not like Toddler. Like I try to do storylines within that strip itself. Like they weren't all like self-contained comics. So it just got to the point where like what else can I really do with it? Without starting over, and what can I really do with it and enjoy it? And what can I draw from if I'm not in that kind of environment anymore?
Right.
So the characters were not writing themselves per se. Like once, like some cartoonists say, like once you set the world up, then it kind of like runs. The characters tell you what is going to happen. You were still directly sort of pulling inspiration from your daily experience of the people and the situations working in the coffee shop.
Right.
Right. So I'm sort of interested in that process where the characters go from being characters to being people, right? Like there must be a process. There must be a certain point at which, as a cartoonist, you go from, okay, this is the angry one, Linus is line. At a certain point, I imagine for somebody like Charles Schultz or any cartoonist, Calvin and Hobbes, those characters become as real as anybody that you know, and therefore if the character will dictate, like Calvin would do this, Calvin would not do this. This character would do this, this character would not feel authentic, would not feel correct. And I imagine that it has to be a certain day or strip, or there must be the blue fairy comes down or something, and ding, today. Because if you say Charlie Brown, you think of him as a person. You don't think of him as a ink line, right? If I say, Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny or Calvin and Hobbes or I don't know, Cats and Jammer Kids, whatever, you think of those characters, or Garfield, you think of him as a personality, as opposed to, just some drawing with a funny gag at the end of the thing. So I'm wondering if on your current strip, you've reached that point that you didn't reach on the other strips.
I don't know if I've reached it yet. Um, because just because the fact, I mean, I do like one comic a week, and I've only been doing it for like 3 years. And I think I still have a lot that I can give the comic before it gets to that point. At least with like say like the dad character. Um, also doesn't help with like with the current strip that it's almost like directly based on my own life. You know, like even more than like on the grind. Um, but I can see it happening. Like I can see that horizon. You know, to where they can write themselves. Like the Tyler can herself because she's a 2 year old. Um, if you know, like you know how 2 year olds act, you know how they respond. As long as she's 2 years old, there's no real growth there, so you know what's going to happen every single time. It's just going to happen in different ways.
Well, she will eternally be 2 years old because she could never be three, right?
I don't know yet. I'm thinking about
Mm.
it. I don't know yet. Like I get that a lot. Like, is she going to be 3? Is she going to be a teenager? And I'm thinking like, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to raise a teenager.
Well,
Well,
in certain strips like Dennis, he's still what 5 or 7, however old he, and
right.
forever he never, he never. I mean, how many times the guy's been put in the corner? He'd be like 90 now.
I mean,
Yeah.
and it's very rare for. I mean, you probably see this more in web comics, growth of characters, like the characters actually aging. I can only think of like Len Johnson, for better or for worse, in the newspapers for characters that actually age through the time of the strip. But I mean, that's a really interesting thing to think about. And George, like you just said, you're not really sure yet. Like maybe something will change your mind later, or maybe as your kids get older, you'll have new material.
Toddler, the college years.
Well, my thought process is this, and it's also the reason why I haven't given the characters names.
Yeah.
Is that when I started this comic, I started it on a whim, and it just took off out of nowhere.
Mm.
So I never really gave myself the time to really flesh it out the way I would have wanted to.
Mm.
But at the same time, like a lot of the readers, especially early on, they relate to themselves in this comic so much, um, that it's become less of like my story, my avatar, and more of theirs.
Mm.
Wow.
And because of that, they're of course their children. They always talk about, this is my life, this is my child. Of course, their children are going to grow up, but guess what's going to happen? Other people are going to have children, and those children are going to become toddlers, and boom, the
Right.
cycle continues. So I don't want to age them up for that reason alone, because so many people can relate to this character in such a way, and then so many people will be able to relate to this character moving forward. Um, and even those people who have kids that relate to it now, those kids will get older, they'll still remember the kid being 2.
Mm.
Like I looked at a video the other day of my daughter when she was 2, and like I had completely forgotten that she'd done these things, because my kids are a bit older now. Um, but because for that reason, I don't know if it would be a wise idea to really age them up that much.
Mm.
Um, you know, and you get to teenage years, and I have I know nothing about that. Like it's going to take me at least, like I'm like 6 years away from like my oldest being, you know, in that age range. So I ain't there yet.
Well, I just think it's an interesting
Mm.
question because when you write most comic strips with a character, you're like, oh, Henry, why he's still whatever age he was 95 years ago, right? And it's the same way with Dennis and most of those child characters, they don't ever age. So there's sort of a evolution and you cover different subjects, but they never you never have that Dennis where he's in the corner because his mom found the Playboys under his bed or something.
Tween Dennis.
Yeah, I just sort of think it's very interesting to write a character to fully develop personalities, very distinct personalities, very rich personalities, off a set of characters that are eternally frozen in time.
Well, I was gonna say, here's the thing though. Like, while they may be frozen in time, there's nothing to say that their environments will be. Um, like for example, like if you're like being a toddler and raising a toddler in 2022 is different than how it's going to be in like 2052. Um, so maybe like if I'm doing it 30 years from now, I don't know. Like she can still be 2 years old, but then like dad has to like keep up with the times without actually aging. That I mean that could be a way around it, but then again, you end up with like all those flashbacks and flash forward episodes of like The Simpsons, in which Homer's like a kid in the 90s and then again in the 70s and the 60s. I don't know. I've got work to do.
Well, I just think, I think it's interesting because if I remember when my niece, who just turned 11, was 1 or 2, they were fascinated by the cell phone, right? In a way that they knew that this was an important thing. Mommy has one, daddy has one, everybody has one. Oh, look, I can touch it, That was something that if you wrote that strip 30 years ago, nobody had a cell phone. So that would not even be something that you would be dealing with, I mean, I deal with it on the Phantom and the fact that he's 86 years old or something, and now he has a cell phone and he's in the modern world to a certain extent. Even in Judge Parker, they're adults, slightly aged up the characters. Sam still drives a 2010 Corvette because that's what he was driving when I started wanting the strip, right? So there's these things you have to think about, and you don't think about them necessarily when you're starting, right? But if you're drawing characters that are in the real world, or are you from the beginning drawing them in Peanuts? You don't really know what that world is. It's the Peanuts world. You see a little bit of it. You see the baseball mound. You see sort of timeless things. So I think that's an interesting aspect to creating a fictional character that essentially becomes frozen, especially the more cartoony, the strips more like what you're doing, even as opposed to something like Spider-Man or Batman or something that intersects with them. You're not going to have guys wearing fedoras now. In 1965, everybody was still kind of wearing fedoras.
Yeah.
Well, you can thread the needle the way that the Batman the Animated Series did, but it's a great consideration when you're going to start something that's going to become that you're going to do for 10 years, that you're going to do for the rest of your life. That it's so interesting to think that put so much thought into it. I thought that was a really interesting choice to not name the characters. I thought, George, I thought that was really cool. I'm like reading this. I'm like, do I know the characters' names? I had read so many strips before. I'm like, I don't know if I know anybody's names.
Yeah, it's very subtle that you don't think about it. Right?
You just get swept in. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I have ideas for names. Like, say if like Tyler ever like showed up in any other form of media, and I had to name them, like I have names in mind, but at this point, like what's the point? Like way too many people see themselves in this comic itself. Like to give them names feels like it will take away from that.
Yeah, and I think you're right with that because I think that maybe a little bit of appeal. I mean, your artwork is fantastic. It's very approachable, and the techniques you're using to do the strip are very modern and it's very controlled and it's crisp. Like when I look at George does a lot of kind of like production like speed drawings and things like that. And I'm just like, wow, it's clean work. But also, I think, and we talked about this a long time ago when we had, I think, Chris Giarusso on. We're talking about cute and what cute is as a comic strip or a cartoon or an avatar of a character. And cute always sells. If I'm sure people don't really want to think about it that way, but I think you've got a really fantastic mix in. um, I don't see why you would be surprised that this turned into a really big hit, because it's hitting a lot of things. And I don't want to say did you plan it like that, but did you consider that you were kind of checking off a lot of really good boxes at the same time to make
No,
the strip happen the way it is?
no, and I kid you not, like with the first, especially with like the first like 10 strips, those were like just verbatim things that actually happened to me. Like I didn't like plan anything. I like it was such, if you can like make a comic strip out of like improv, if there's like a comic strip version of improv, Beware Toddler in the beginning was like that. It's like
Hmm.
nothing was planned. I drew all the characters on the spot, and I fleshed them out from there, of course. But like just beginning, it was all just like this on the spot, um, based off things that actually happened.
Hmm.
It just happens that the toddler character is cute, because at the same time, because she's loosely modeled after my daughter.
Hmm.
My daughter was cute at the time, so I mean, everybody says that,
Uh,
but
that's great.
well, everybody says it, but either way, my daughter was cute at the time.
Mm.
Um, and it just happened to work, and even to this day, I'm still surprised that it's got as far as it has.
Mm.
How
And
did you come up with the name
yeah.
for Beware of Toddler?
I just I don't know where, like,
It's really good.
it just came to me, like, and the first thing I did was like looked it up. I made sure that nobody else had it, because um you've got a toddler, she's doing like just like crazy stuff. For some reason, all of my comics, like all their names, like three words. It just, I don't know why. But um I just thought it up, like before I posted that first one. Like after I drew it, but before I posted it, I like just came up with the name. It just happened that there isn't really anything with that name, so I just ran with it.
That's actually a very important step. I mean, I've done that many times. When I think of something, the first thing I do is go and Google it. And I have ideas that I plan on working on, that I Googled the idea, and then I went and I actually registered the domain, because it
Right.
doesn't cost much to do that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that don't do those things, and then find out, unfortunately, after they're like the train is already down the track, that like, oh, by the way, you didn't do your business part. Because I think
Right.
that's very important, probably actually more important today, because it's so easy to do copyright search, all that kind of stuff. I think that's an important part. Like the old cartoonists didn't really have to worry about that stuff, because if they did something with the syndicate, the syndicate does all that. The syndicate chose the name. The syndicate says we're going to call it Peanuts. You know what I mean? They have lawyers that do all that stuff. But as an independent creator, deciding today, I'm going to draw my comic strip, and I'm going to call it Fancy Noodles, right?
Yo, I love Fancy Noodle.
Right? It's going to be about
I want to see if that's available.
right. It's going to be about a poodle that runs a noodle shop, right? You know, and you could just sit down and start drawing, and in an hour you could have like your Fancy Noodles, comic strip, right? That has never been available to cartoonists before the web stuff. And at the same time, you realize that you have to have all this other business side to it. Or you could have a great idea, but like, oh man, I just don't like the name now, and somebody else somebody else has Beware Toddler, strollers or something, and so I always like to talk to the artist about that step and when you became aware of that part of the process as well, because drawing is important, but in order to make a living drawing, you got to intersect with the business part.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and you know what? I want to maybe switch gears for a second because there's some questions in the chat room.
And maybe we can share some art too.
Yeah, you said you had some stuff queued up. All right, well, don't do it just yet. But we have a couple of questions that all kind of like field around kind of your process, George. So first, our good buddy Notorious JRD, J. Robert Dean says, obviously your strip is loosely inspired by your family life, but do you ever write gags based on things you've heard from other parents?
I don't directly. People will try to tell you stories, but here's the thing: the things that I've heard from other parents are the same things that's happened to me. like, I mean, it's in their programming. It's like they're learning. It's they're babies.
Right.
So I don't think I've ever had anyone tell me anything that's happened to them that has not already happened to me.
Well, how about this? Do you have, and this might be more of a fandom thing, I'm sure you have fans or readers or patrons of your product that may want to give you ideas. It'd be great, George, if you did this and then the toddler fell down the steps, would that be, you should put that in your strip. Have you gotten suggestions like that, and how do you deal with unwarranted gag strip advice?
Oh, I just tune out the minute someone says you should. like those bugs that curl to a ball when you tap them.
Yeah,
it's like that with my ears whenever somebody says you should.
Fantastic.
like my defense mechanism just kicks up. And it's not like they might not have good ideas. It's that I would not want to make a comic that someone else has pitched to me, and then they say, "Hey, I came up with that idea. Give me X amount of money," and I'm thinking, I don't even have that money. Right. At the same time, I think sometimes people say, "Yeah, man, you that kid needs a whooping," and things like that. You should have him get a whooping. I'm thinking you can't do that in 2022. That's not okay. It's not.
Beware of whoopings. The next comic, right?
Yeah, beware.
I'm like, no, I was like, what am I gonna do? Draw CPS taking my kid away? No. How much extra work that's gonna give me? I
love the new character in the universe is from Human Services who's coming.
But
I think that happens with probably every strip. There's that type of fan who wants to tell you how to do it because they secretly think that they can actually do a better job than you can do.
Mm-hmm.
I see that a lot, and I've seen that from the beginning. I've been doing Judge Parker going on 13 years. There is a certain aspect of fandom who feels like I could write Star Trek, and I could write Star Trek better than the people that write Star Trek. They've never written anything. They've never done 5 strips, but they are convinced they could do a better job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to challenge them. Write it.
Yeah,
and then we'll see what happens.
Well, that is such a real thing, and I love the stiff arm you just give to that kind of stuff, because I know that bothers a lot of creators where they feel like they don't want to upset the apple cart, or they want to go, yeah, that sounds great, or they might put some really interesting signature in their emails and say anything that is transcribed here is not binding, or you know what I mean? Like people are always just trying to protect themselves from.
I also think it's because of all forms of celebrity, cartoonists are the most accessible. You know what I mean? They're the most universal, I think, in some respects, and the most accessible, because you can't tell Tom Cruise, "Hey, man, I just saw that last film and that scene where you did that thing." You can write a letter. Tom Cruise is never going to see your letter. Right? He never going to. But you could go to Comics Kingdom today and write, Manley, you really sucked this week, right? There's a possibility, because it's on a public forum about my strip, that I might see it, right? But you're not going to be able to write any higher form of celebrity. Stephen King, I don't know, unless you got his address, and he's not reading those letters. He's got somebody who's reading the letters for him. They get the nut ball. That was almost, you know?
Right. Yeah. I have a couple more in here, and this is from our good buddy David Peterson. I love Mouse Guard. Hello, David. David says, and you kind of touched on this, but I wanted to bring it back up again with more of an answer. How much prep goes into strips in advance? Notes, pre-written gags, or come up with the idea when you sit down based on whatever happened that morning? How do you kind of structure your week of strips?
Oh, I don't. It's all chaos. Just straight up chaos, like all day, every day. No, no, but in all seriousness, before Comics Kingdom, I'd have a general idea of what I want to do. And I wouldn't even write it down. I just think about it, and when I sit down, I'll just start drawing it. I'll like write the comic as I'm drawing it. And I mean, it's what I was conditioned to do at the time. Um, recently, I've been doing like more planning. I actually I got a notepad. I've been actually writing things down. And like the jokes these days, the jokes come to me fairly easily. It's just a matter of how to get there. So I'll just like write things down. I'll use my notepad. Um, I use the notepad on Windows because it's cloud based. I'll just type out my ideas whenever I can. Um, Sometimes I'll like make some comics, like just some individual strips, as sequels to other strips.
Nice.
Um, because I mean, especially now with Comics Kingdom, because I've got like what 10 comics up there now. And a lot of people don't know there's like another 200 comics before that. So and unless I like go back and redraw all of those because the art style was so different, I think it's just a better idea to just kind of make little like semi sequels to those strips in which you don't need to read the other ones to understand what's going on.
Gotcha.
And that's been very helpful for me.
Very cool. All right. So next up, hold on a second. We got some structure here. Our good buddy D. Brad Gibson asking, thanks, David. I may have missed it, but what digital drawing or coloring program do you use currently, George?
Right now, I use Clip Studio Paint for everything, like start to finish. Every once in a while, I might like dip into Photoshop for like minor things, usually like with like colors and dealing with CMYK
Yeah.
because Clip Studio still needs some work with that.
Mhm.
Um, and like some like lettering like related things. No, the last update would have fixed that, but yeah, Clip Studio pretty much like 99.9% of the time.
I've found lettering like harder than it needs to be in Clip Studio Paint. I don't know why. Like it's all
Really?
set up there, but it's just kind of like it. I don't know. It just feels like it's fighting me. I feel like I'm back in Word Perfect or Claris Works or something like that. I went back in my time machine.
Yeah, I think Clip Studio needs a way to distort the text when dealing with text.
Hmm.
Um, Everything else I think is perfect, but like if they could just do that one thing, like I can like retire from Photoshop for good.
Are you strictly digital? Do you do any traditional art at this point, George?
It's been a while. I'll do like things at shows or whatnot, at cons, but at this point, yeah, it's completely digital.
And is that for a certain reason? And did you have a transition period where you're doing things on paper and then you were like, "Yo, I'm gonna do this Cintiq."
Yeah, I did like somewhere in between, like doing no Photoshop, doing on the grind.
Mhm.
I was doing things like traditional, and like I'll like color in GIMP or whatnot.
Oh, you're
Um,
doing okay. Uh-huh.
And then somewhere along the lines, like I bought like this cheap like bamboo tablet. Um, everything happens in the mid 2000s.
That's right.
This cheap bamboo tablet, and I started playing around with like drawing digitally from there. And I haven't really looked back. Um, I prefer it. I outside of like just comics, outside of comics, I'm a very tech focused person.
Mm-hmm.
I like computers. Like I like video games. Yes, I like computers. I built my computer.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, um, so I've always been like in tune with these things with technology. So for me, it's easier for me
Mm-hmm.
because that's the world that I was a part of, like that I am a part of outside of comics.
Gotcha. All right, and it's crazy. We're running out of time. We're good. We're still good, but I want to make sure we get to the kind of the entry point into how Toddler got picked up by King Features and Comics Kingdom and all that. You got to tell that story, George.
Well, crazy thing is almost exactly like the Beano story. They reached out to me, and
And wait, and is this all off of the strength of your social media?
I think it's the strength of the social media. Beware Tyler is a Ringo nominee. So last year Ringo nominee.
So you coming to Baltimore, George?
I cannot. I can't. I want to. I really wanted to last year. It's hard to do these things. Like got the small children around.
Yeah, word. Yeah.
But this year I'm starting to realize that like this thing is actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Baltimore is a goal. It's definitely a goal of mine. But yeah, yeah, they reached out to me. This was like just the comic became popular. Like I was able to get like 14,000 like followers on Facebook, like another 14,000 on Webtoon. Because the comic was there before Comics Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
The Ringo nomination, the Glyph nominations, just like all of that. The fact that I'm putting comics out like on a regular basis because I do try to post at least once a week. Um, it just like, and the fact that I'm like extremely lucky, it all just like came together, and here we are.
Wow. And I love the ask. I love that when these companies approach you. I mean, besides just the leverage thing there is so like you couldn't ask for a better output, right? And also, and I guess I even wanted to speak to you thing about the Beano strip. That's something that you probably couldn't ever apply for.
Yeah,
Like if you were somewhere like writing drawing very British comic strips in your house, you're like, I want to be, I want to get published in London. They'd be like, get out of here. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like it's
Beano,
very,
the magic altar. I bet I should submit this to Beano.
so I think it just speaks to kind of like how popular your work is going. And on that subject, so you're on Webtoons.
Mhm.
Where was your biggest audience online? Is it Webtoons, or was it Insta, or your Facebook? It was just a mix of all three of those.
Um,
Or am I
it's
missing something?
I would say it was Facebook and Webtoon equally.
Okay.
I will give the edge to Facebook because I built that audience first,
Hmm.
and then I somehow built a completely separate audience for Webtoon. Um,
Because they are really different audiences. I
they
mean, the webtoon audience is a teenage audience, where Facebook is not. And I could tell on my Instagram, because in my Instagram it was linked to my Facebook, and I can go through and I can look at male versus female, ages and everything. And you go on webtoons, it's I just know even from teaching the students in the class all read stuff on webtoons. They're all 14 because it's free.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's that whole that whole thing is they're different than even like when you were younger coming on the internet, right? And we were much more hunter-gatherers by nature, I think, than the young person now, because stuff is actually spit at you, right? And it wasn't really spit at you 20 years ago. Not the way that it is now. You know, like Webtoons is what funded by that South Korean phone company, right?
Neighbor.
Right. And so they've got gajillions of dollars to push, right? Which is very different. You know, Marvel didn't push, DC didn't push. Nobody online was pushing stuff at you 20 years ago.
And so, and maybe to that, George, tell us about the journey to building up that audience. Did you feel like you had to kind of like push hard? Were you just dropping strips and just sitting back and watching the numbers accumulate? Were you kind of like playing with boosting some stuff, letting some stuff slide, putting some illustrations out here, playing screens there? Yeah, like, you know, it was just all just natural. Your audience.
All just natural. It was weird. Like I had not boosted a single like post like toddler related thing until the book's Kickstarter. And that was like the one and only time I did that. It was just completely natural, and it was this weird thing. And the weirdest thing about it is it wasn't even from people that you would traditionally think reads comics. Like it was more like the general audience. Like, you know, the people that we try to get, like, you know, out in a while when they, you know, we try to get them to read our scripts.
Yeah.
It was those people. They were coming to me, and like I to this day I don't know what happened, how it happened, but it did.
Wow, that's
Well, it's kind of if you think about it, and you just back up and think about it, you're writing a strip about a pretty universal subject matter, right? Parents and kids doing funny things, right? Which is a general audience subject matter or a comic strip. And there were many general audience comic strips. And Facebook is a general audience platform, right? I think Webtoons is even more of a specific audience platform as opposed to Facebook, right?
Yeah.
And Instagram is somewhere sort of in between, because you can say, oh, I just want to look at photographers, or I want to look at model trains, or whatever. And so I think, yeah, your strip, you could have done the strip in the 50s. You could have done the strip in the 40s. You could have done the strip in the 30s, because those are sort of universal things you're dealing with. What a 2-year-old does. That's a general audience thing. And I think that could just naturally appeal, and your drawing style is appealing. So it's like a perfect sandwich, you know. It's like it's got enough bread, and it's got enough peanut butter and enough jelly, just like the perfect
just enough crust. Right.
Yeah, because if you're like on Webtoons, you know, and you want to read about gay teenage boy vampires, well, that's not really as a universal. You're not going to get grandmas reading that, but a grandma would read your strip, and maybe a 20-year-old with a baby would read that strip. So I think that's still the difference between what the syndicates do and what the modern syndicate like Webtoon does. Their audiences are big, but they're more fractured into special interests, as opposed to the old syndicates where like Charlie Brown was like universal, you know.
Right.
You know, it's a very different. You're trying to sort of shotgun and reach a big audience, as opposed to like, well, I'm just going to get teenage girls between 12 and 20 before they go to college, right? Because then also people's tastes change sometimes when you go from being a teenager to being in college. I mean, I've actually seen that with my friends whose tastes change when they go from being 14 to being 25.
So, and you know what? I don't know where the time's going. That's my favorite quote here, pencil to pencil. But George, do you still want to show us some art before we get out of
Oh
here?
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So,
Let me see. Let me pull it up. There's a lot of fan art here. It's only a few pieces.
okay.
Let
Steve,
me
you're going to say something?
What's that?
Steve, you're going to say something?
Well, I was going to ask, where do you prefer people to read Toddler now? Where Beware of Toddler? Do you prefer to read them on your website, on social media, on Comics Kingdom? Is there a better best place for them?
Comics Kingdom, because that's pretty much where the new stuff is going to be. Like my website is a great place like to read the archives, as well as Webtoon, but it's like all the same content.
Hmm.
Eventually, what I want to do is have the new comics come up on Comics Kingdom, have like news and like fun stuff on my main website. But yeah, read them both. you if you read them both, you get two different sets of comics. But yeah,
That's great.
Cool. All right, let's see that art.
all right. Let's
So,
see.
yeah, you have to you have to go in and share it.
So we're gonna share
And then,
screen.
yeah, and then share which screen.
All right, we're gonna share my main screen here.
All right, and I'll put it up when you're ready. All
All
right, there we are. We're in.
All right, so this is from the reset button. All video game tech related humor and some of the worst art you'll see tonight.
Oh, come on. That's great.
Um, let's see what's next. Wait, oh, okay. Is my keyboard not working? Hide that. Okay, there we go. And the keyboard is still not responding to me. There, Tyler Homelander.
I love it.
Tyler Homelander. And I was just doing that for fun, but that's actually one of the few things I actually did print out. And there's Pikachu. Going back to the question about warm ups, for some reason, like drawing Pokemon is a very good warm up exercise for me. I don't know why. I really like drawing Pokemon.
That's lovely.
Thank you.
And George, do you kind of like in? Did you figure out your style like along the way? Because I know you said that you had some early influences on wanting to do webcomics by like Penny Arcade and things like that. And I know Gabe over at Penny Arcade was always kind of pushing the envelope with his art. And he was really inspired by Steven Silver, another friend of ours. And I wonder if what are some of your cartooning influences? And yeah,
Well,
please keep showing art, but I just wanted to ask you that.
okay. Well, let's see. And we got Moo Homer over here.
So,
Excellent.
I still watch The Simpsons to this day, but oh man, like my influences. Well, my biggest one is as a child from the '80s, is Calvin and Hobbes.
mhm,
Like I think that's one you can probably see in my work,
mhm,
to a point.
mhm,
Um, Calvin and Hobbes is like the big one. Penny Arcade was one for a while. The Boondocks was one for a while. With like the reset button stuff, I was like into like video game art from the '90s.
yeah,
In a sense, Tezuka,
yeah,
Creative Astro Boy was one. Whenever I do something like a kind of painted style like Toddler, that's because Steve drew something that made me jealous, and I had to like try to try to step up my game. um, and let's see.
That's
Now,
a
is that
beautiful
your lettering? Did you come up with a font, your own font?
Oh no, I'm horrible at hand lettering and handwriting in general. If you saw me write, you would think I was a doctor, but but
I love the open panels.
yeah.
yeah, that was my Calvin and Hobbes influence there, especially like with like the inking and whatnot.
Mhm.
Um, like who else like influenced me? I've got like those. like I've been like into like Scotty Young's work, like with the expressions.
Hmm.
I'm influenced by that. Um, while not uh, directly influenced, I've been really compelled into Walt Kelly's work lately.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
everybody needs some pogo in their life.
I
Absolutely.
so I just picked it up like just last week.
Oh, so you're new. So you're pretty new to pogo.
So I'm new to Pogo and by extension Bone as well.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm dipping my toes into those.
Fantastic.
Uh,
Ah,
Tyler Batman.
So even with that, like, has your influences, like, how does that translate into, say, like your inking line, or your kind of like your thick thin of your line weights and things like that? Are you that deep with it?
Well, with that, that's less about being influenced and more about what feels good to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like like I try, even though I work digitally, I try to emulate like as much of a tactile feel as possible.
Hmm.
Like I've got like this like matte screen protector and whatnot.
Yeah.
And if it feels good to me, like to the point where like I'm enjoying, doing so, um, then I roll with it.
Okay. All right. Cool.
And then that translate into the inking itself. Like if you see like some of the differences in line weights, that's less because I'm trying to emulate a style and more like, I was in the groove and that's like I felt good doing so.
Yeah, yeah. So you're kind of lyrical with it, like what feels good at the moment. We'll go with
Ex-
that.
Exactly. Actually, speaking of lyrical, yeah, let me
You-
throw that there.
Oh, I saw you working on that online. I'm a big MF Doom fan. That's great.
Oh man, likewise. That's like 99% of the time if I'm like drawing and listening to music, it's like Doom or like Mad Lib
I
or
love it.
something. Like I've got the mask.
Yeah, they'll make me
Actually,
put you on a full screen. Oh, that's a nice one. Where'd you get that?
Amazon? I just got off
What?
Amazon.
You can get it, Mike. You got to get that dude mask
ah,
for the studio. That's what's up.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. I'll like find a guy, like, whoever did it. But yeah, I
Mhm.
did that like last Halloween.
Yeah.
Um, what? Here, let me. Do I have some older stuff? There's on grinding here. So, oh goodness.
Yeah. Can you
Yeah,
biggerize it?
no, that's the bad one.
All right.
I didn't mean to put that there.
Oh no.
But that's like the second book, Electric Boogaloo. Um,
That's great. And your cartooning style has changed so much because you're kind of like doing like the big eyes, like Bloom County type style to your characters, and it seems like you kind of do that still, but it seems like it's like more nuanced now.
yeah, yeah, it was kind of hard to find space for like noses and mouths, so
Mm-hmm.
I had to compromise. I still keep the big eyes for the toddler because she's a toddler, and by
Right.
extension, she has big eyes
Right.
most of the time.
Hmm.
Um,
Your graphic design is also always on point. I love that. I
uh,
love that the covers. You've always have great typography.
Hmm.
It's always so strong.
Hmm.
Thank you. That's like the one thing I learned in school, the only thing that and color theory, but I don't even think I
No,
paid
that
attention
comes
to that class.
that comes through in your work. It definitely does. And, it's all very pro, and I think that's another reason for its appeal. Because
Uh,
we've all seen, just to be real, we've all seen a lot of bad cartooning. You know what I mean? So like the good stuff really stands out.
Well, yeah, I try. Well, I the fact that I know when I was doing bad work, and I know when I'm doing bad work,
Yeah,
it's easy for me to like I just want to get better.
yeah.
Like I think something that I learned as a cartoonist is that a lot of cartoonists starting out, especially web cartoonists, aren't doing it to make cartoons. They do it to because they think it's an easy path to something else.
I had to laugh at that. That's ridiculous. But I believe but
an
I
easy
believe you.
path to what? To
Oh, they think like, hey, I'm gonna make this cartoon. Maybe somebody will like
Mm,
let me like make a movie or something. I don't know, but like
wow.
people think that way. And people think that way. And when I was younger, I thought, hey, maybe if I create this cartoon, I can do other things with it. So I understand, but somewhere along the lines, I realized that I just like doing it. I like to learn from it. I like to improve. I like seeing, you know, I like seeing like my work
Well,
change.
it's you for you. I mean, one of the things that is hard for, I mean, a lot of people think, oh, I'll make my cartoon, and then one day it'll be on Cartoon Network, and that's a very dicey process. One, because you have to produce enough of it long enough, years, before it ends up being on, a cartoon.
Yeah.
I think that's the part of Pikachu Fantasy Camp, which is what I call it, where like I'm gonna do my thing and then it's gonna be popular. But most cartoonists are doing it because they're compelled to do it, because you, like you just said, you're doing it because you love to do it. And all those other things, which may or may not come out of the process, you can't hold that in your mind the whole time you're trying to just sit there and draw,
Right.
But I see it though now. Like now I see it, or maybe it's just more visible to me now. But I see it like with a lot of like younger cartoonists, like people starting out and focusing on what they want to get out of it that is not related to the craft itself. And when I was younger, I thought the same thing, and I do not think that way anymore. I just want to make good cartoons. And I try to tell people that when you think that way, like it shows up in your work.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Well,
And
that's that skill achievement that is what drives you to get better. It's you deciding that you want to get better at cartooning, like get better at inking or make your figures more fluid or whatever. If you're trying to draw, and there was a lot of guys in comic books in the 90s who thought that sort of the same thing. I'll imitate these guys' styles enough that I will become super successful. And one by one, all those people always fall by the roadside, because that's not something that's sustainable. It's not it doesn't push you over the hump. It doesn't, you have those days, I'm sure, where you sit down and it's a struggle to draw, and you're not happy with what you do, and you erase the thing, 30 times to get that expression you want on a face. That's what makes a good cartoonist. To me, that's what makes a good cartoonist. Not all those other outside things, which of course you never have any control over at all. Because even if you get an option, from the time you get an option to they decide to go ahead and make the pilot, they may go to the pilot but not even finish the pilot. I mean, I know so many people have gone through that process, that if that's your golden reason, 9 times out of 10 you're going to be very disappointed.
Yeah.
George, how many times have somebody asked you, yo, when they gonna make a cartoon, yo?
Man, oh my goodness.
Yo, you know what? This should be a cartoon.
All the time. And if I had $1 for every time that happened, I swear, man. It's happened a lot. It's happened this week. And you know what? It's nice. It feels good for someone to tell you that.
Sure.
If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm the fact that I've gotten as far as I've gotten.
Yeah.
Is still mind blowing. Anything after that is just like, is this my life?
Yeah.
But no, but I'm right now. I'm making these cartoons. I'm enjoying making these cartoons, and
Mhm.
that's pretty much where where I'm at right now, making them the best that I can make them. I getting people to enjoy these cartoons.
Mhm.
I figure like my main goal, if I have to have my impossible goal, is to have like everybody in like the comics kingdom, like comic section, like unanimously love this comic. That'll be my movie deal
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
um will it happen? I don't know. But I just I'm just trying to make good comics right now.
I love it. And you know what? It was almost like not a loaded question because we get asked that stuff all the time. I'm sure there's people in the room that have. That's the first thing that comes to people's minds when they really like something. And this is kind of a bugaboo of mine is that I feel like our culture is set as a movie or a TV show is the ultimate form.
Then it'll really be cool when they make a TV show out of it,
Right,
right?
not your 25 years of this comic strip that you've
Right.
been slaving on. When they make a movie that you forget about
When
after you
Tom
scream
Cruise is playing the toddler, you would have made it.
it. Chop running, Tom Cruise. You know what I'm saying? And I love to hear when cartoonists go, no, I make comic strips, I make books. That's what I do. The rest is gravy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sandman finally made it by being a show on Netflix.
Yeah, wow.
Now I'll admit one thing though. I'll admit, um, I do like have voices in my head. Like if that were ever to happen, I know who'd I want to play what. But I think everybody does that. But I'm not actively trying to
Yeah,
make this happen.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you're doing
You're
really
not sending
cool.
it to their agent. Hey, by the way,
All right. And we have, we're going to start wrapping up. George, you were a fantastic guest.
Oh, thank you.
I think the chat was quiet because they were just watching and listening, and sometimes that's a bad thing, but it was a good thing tonight. So I really appreciate that. I have one last question from our buddy Tim Fielder. Tim asks, and this is for you, George, and Steve. Sorry, I'm covering up everybody's faces. Do you guys feel that having a comic on the web affects your book sales in any way? How so? Can you speak to that?
Hmm. I. You know what? Well, here's the thing. Like, would I even have a book if it wasn't for my comic being on the web?
Oh, snap.
That's the thing. Like,
Right.
yeah, it's unfortunate, but if it wasn't for the platforms that I have, I would not be where I am today.
Mhm.
Um, at the same time, like that was something like when I put out my toddler book that I was worried about is that will people just go to the website and just read the comics instead of reading the book?
Mhm.
In fact, that actually happened like with one of my on the ground books. Once they found out it was a web comic, they was like, "Well, why am I going to buy the book if it's online?"
so
Uh,
what was that audience? A young audience?
no, that was like an older person. Like actually asked me that question. Um,
Like he challenged you to have an answer for that. Like, what's
yeah,
the point of you making a book?
like why would I buy this book when I can just read it online?
Mr.
And
Cheapy Cheapskate.
and and you can get upset at that, and but at the same time, you can that when I did the Kotler book, I actually asked myself, like, why should people back this book
Yeah,
if they could just read the comic online?
great question.
And what that did for me was that led me to write a 4-page comic that is only in the book.
Hmm.
There you go.
So the idea is instead of yeah, it's easy to be worried about it, but for me, it was I'm just gonna throw something in the book that you can't see anywhere else.
I like
At the same time, like I and then you throw in like art and things like that, like extra sketches, things like that, and I got a lot of guest art to go in the book as well. So those extras is what should push you over. At the same time, if you really love this comic, like you're gonna like buy this book from the guy who makes it because if you're getting it from the guy who makes it, I'm the same one, packing it, shipping it. You have an interaction with me that's not just I read your comic on Facebook.
yeah, I like
That's
it. All
Yeah, I
right.
great.
think that there's an investment in supporting that's the nice thing about stuff like being a cartoonist, is that it can actually be very personal. You can have a very personal relationship with your fans, because it's much more direct. You know, there's less steps between you. So if you do and your fandom, especially with something like a Kickstarter.
We have one last one on here.
I was going to add on what George said there. The only thing I would say, ask just to respond to Tim's, I would just totally sign on to what George said about that people wouldn't buy my book if they hadn't heard of me. And so the webcomic makes that possible. But also there are some people who don't want to read comics online. And so that's a separate audience. I view them as two very different people. And if you want to save $25 and read it online, I don't, if you can read it for free, please do. You know, I didn't have $25 for the longest time. So by all means, but some people just don't want to read online. So it's really two different audiences, and really helpful for parents, because sometimes someone will ask me, is your book okay for kids? I'm like, it's free to read online. Kick the tires. Before you buy it, make sure it's okay for your kids. So I feel like that gets me out of, Do
you tell them the first hit is free?
I do that with my postcard. Because it's like I've got the first page on my postcard. I handed it to him. I said, "That's how I get you."
Yeah, you got a long fingernail for that first strip. Yeah.
He puts the card right in the fingernail, holds it right out.
Our buddy Kenan asked, how long should you do a comic before admitting that it may never catch?
The minute you stop enjoying making the comic, when it becomes a chore and you don't enjoy it, it becomes a slog and you don't feel like you're getting anything out of it, and it's not catching on with anyone else, because the minute you stop enjoying it, that will transfer into the comic itself. And then you're just going to, after that, you're just wasting time.
Wow.
That said, that doesn't mean you can't come back to it later. But the minute you don't enjoy it is like, you really have to like make some hard decisions. Doesn't mean stop doing comics. Maybe you just need to take a break or switch it up, do something different. Tyler's my fourth webcomic, so like I understand. But like if you're unhappy drawing it and you're miserable, and that's your comic, then you probably shouldn't be working on it.
Oh, I love it! What a great way to end this episode. Thank you so much, Kenan, for your question. Thank you, George, for being a fantastic guest. Guys, George, I got to give you props. You did a fantastic job advertising your appearance on this episode. I saw it was all over the internet. You're really good at that. I got to give you your props on that.
Man, that is luck. I don't know what the algorithm has been doing to me the last 2 weeks, but I cannot complain.
Yeah, I saw posts like all day. Like, it followed me into the bathroom. It was fantastic. So, guys, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We'll be back here next Wednesday, where the world will have changed because Leon Extraordinaire will be out in the world. So everything changes after here. And we may have another really cool guest on for you to talk to. So for my co-host Steve, my co-host Mike, and to our guest George, thank you so much. George, you know how we get out of here, right? You got to hang out with us. You know how we do our intro, our outros. So guys, be safe out there. There's a lot of wild stuff going on. And remember, we're still in a pandemic. So don't forget to wash those Kirby hands. Get those Kirby hands up, George. I see them. Yeah, that's what's up. Oh, look at that backlighting. That's a good one. All right, you guys. Thanks so much. Have a great night.
Thank you, George.
See ya.
Thank you.